9 people were shot, a dozen were injured. This happened in the mass shooting last March at Piper Arms. Today, police announced arrests and charges. CP24's Beatrice Vaisman and crime analyst Steve Ryan connect the dots.
6 people shot in another mass shooting. 1 died. This happened last night at Lawrence Heights. This evening, police continue to search for suspects.
50% tariffs on steel and aluminum are now in effect. Canada's business community warns of the ripple effects from this latest round of Trump tariffs. We have the latest reaction this hour.
And part of that reaction includes the Bank of Canada holding interest rates steady. We have what you need to know about how this affects your money coming up.
This is Live at 5.
Hello, I'm Arda Zakarian.
And I'm Bakari Savage. Welcome to Live at 5. We have a warning that some viewers may find the following video disturbing.
10 people have been arrested and more than 200 charges have been laid in several violent incidents across the GTA, including a mass shooting at a Scarborough pub.
On March 7th, 3 suspects opened fire with an assault-style rifle and 2 handguns at Piper Arms pub near the 401 and McCowan. A dozen people were injured, including 9 who were shot. All the victims survived, although police say some sustained life-altering injuries.
The Toronto Police Service has arrested 10 men in connection with a series of violent incidences that occurred across the GTA, and 1 man remains outstanding. These incidents include a mass shooting at a pub in Scarborough on Friday, March 7th, 2025. That night, 3 suspects entered the pub and opened fire inside. 9 people were shot and other people were injured as a result. No one was killed, which is truly a miracle. But the effects of this mass shooting remain devastating for the victims and for the sense of safety in our communities.
Investigators were able to establish links between the pub shooting and several other previously unsolved shootings, including at a tow truck yard in the city.
Right now, let's go live to CP24's Beatrice Vaisman and crime analyst Steve Ryan. They join us live from police headquarters.
Bakari, Arda, when you talk about that link, that key link that police were able to establish thanks to 1 suspect who police allege was involved both in the Piper Arms shooting and at least 2 other shootings, 1 in Scarborough, 1 at St. Clair and Weston. That really is a key piece of information. That link is going to be pivotal to this case. I want to play for our viewers once again this surveillance video footage from inside the Piper Arms because it really it paints a very clear picture as to what happened. You see patrons there just by the front door hanging out in a pub, as we all do, when 3 suspects, masked suspects, 1 with a assault-style rifle and 2 handguns, come into the pub and they start firing indiscriminately, with zero disregard for human life, as the chief had to say. That's certainly the terror that people inside this pub that night, March 7th, almost 3 months ago, experienced on opening night. When I was there a couple of days later, we saw the aftermath of the shooting, bullet holes in the wood paneling, in the bar, the doors, the shattered glass in the windows, and the panels and panes of the windows as well. You could see dozens and dozens of shots were fired. In total, 12 people injured. 9 of them we now know were shot. 3 others suffering injuries from things like broken glass and flying debris as they were trying to duck out of the way, get out of the way, escape just this melee and the chaos in the midst of this shooting. And so we heard today from the superintendent in charge of organized crime enforcement, Paul McIntyre, about what some of these victims experienced that night and in the aftermath as well. Listen.
We've stayed in contact with the victims and their families throughout. Many continue to recover from serious physical and emotional trauma. Some were shot multiple times. 1 person was shot 6 times and survived. Their strength and resilience has been remarkable.
So that was March 7th, 3 days prior, March 4th, police say there were 2 other violent incidents. The first one at St. Clair and Weston, when police say that several masked suspects got to a tow truck yard and opened fire, one of the victims ducking for cover behind a vehicle. We have that surveillance video to share with our viewers as well. There it is. And then a second scenario as well at a car wash. This is on the other side of the city at Markham Road in Eglinton, when police say at least one suspect arrived and opened fire on a man who was washing his car. Thankfully, in all of these scenarios, all of the victims managed to survive, thankfully, Bakari and Arda. But some just incredible police work in terms of making these arrests. 10 people arrested, 203 charges in total. Let's bring in our crime analyst, Steve Ryan, to dissect a little bit more of what we're seeing. First of all, surveillance video really is king here. How vital do you think this information that police shared with us, made public today, really is in this case?
Well, your best evidence is your surveillance video. It even trumps, if you will, eyewitness accounts, because it can't be misinterpreted. It is what it is. So this video today was released, and there may be some shock value to that as well, hoping perhaps that people view this and they are quite disturbed by what they see. Perhaps they'll pick up the phone, drop a dime on somebody, and give the police another lead.
When you talk about the fact that police now say they have the 3 suspects who are alleged to have been involved for the shooting at the Piper Arms in custody. They've linked one of those individuals to these 2 other cases within the tow truck turf war. That's the key link, police say, at this point, between these individuals and the tow truck turf wars. What do you make of that component? Yeah,
well, and that's a great point. Sometimes the lack of motive is your motive. And in this investigation, the announcement today, the police have said that with regards to the restaurant shooting, they did not really provide a motive, nor could they rule out the connection with the tow truck industry, Occam's razor. Sometimes your obvious answer is staring you right in the face, and that is your reason. So given that at least one of them was associated with that shooting, and they're all connected as part of the same group, as the superintendent said, who were just gathered as hired hitmen, are thugs, most likely and they're just allegations right now, but most likely you might see a connection between that restaurant and the tow truck industry, but that'll all be part of the investigation, I'm sure.
When you say hired shooter, Steve, I think the average person who doesn't live a life of crime and violence might be surprised that there are people like this here in our city who, for money, can enter a life of crime and violence. What do you say to that? And I guess, does that happen more than maybe the vast majority of us realize? Well,
sadly, it has always been available, but I think we're seeing it more and more. And it appears as though, just based on the information that I've heard and the videos that we've seen, and the fact that nobody was killed, thankfully, this appears to be hired thugs who are out to intimidate those in the tow truck industry. And if somebody died, oh well, somebody died. I mean, it's either that or it's just sheer incompetence where nobody died, thankfully, but could that be as a result of lack of intent, or could that be a result of just being amateurs?
Where does the investigation go from here? Because I'm sure while police have 10 people in custody, 1 still outstanding, they probably, I imagine, want to know who hired these gunmen to do this.
Yeah, and I would suggest that most likely they have an idea as to who the hired people were. They just are not ready to make that announcement with regards to the public, and they may be waiting for some of those who are in custody now to roll, perhaps get themselves a better deal when it comes to sentencing. Maybe they will provide some information as well, but they will also try to make that connection, or not, between the restaurant shooting and the tow truck industry, despite what we just talked about here.
The average person has no connection to the tow truck industry. So when we see this kind of violence, and we covered a lot here on CP24, disagreements or violence within the tow truck industry. But when you add a restaurant or a pub where innocent people go, and it can be you or me or anybody who's at the pub that night, what do you think that does to just raise, I guess, the public temperature and concern about what's happening within these tow truck wars?
So as I always say, a community's perception is a community's reality. And if you have such an open event for anybody to go to, you or I could be sitting down there having dinner, having no idea that there was going to be a blast of gunfire coming through that restaurant. We may decide, let's pass on dinner tonight. And as a law enforcement manager managing crime and disorder, that's something you do not want to happen to your community, because the community tends to alter their quality of life as a result of being afraid of being the next victim. So great work on the police to be able to identify those suspects as quickly as they did. 3 months is nothing when you got 3 unknown suspects fleeing from a shooting scene. Good work, and I'm sure they'll continue to try to make a connection, or at least provide a motive, establish a motive as to what the reason was for that shooting in the restaurant.
Yeah, great police work. Steve Ryan, thanks so much. Bakari and Arda, I mean, this is a story that really garnered a lot of public attention. It really did. The reason being, it was one of the first mass shootings the city's had in a very long time. And as Steve and I were talking about, thankfully, nobody lost their life in any of these shootings, actually. Back to you.
Okay, live team coverage from TPS headquarters with CP24. CP24's Beatrice Vaisman and crime analyst Steve Ryan. Thank you. Well, also, police are looking for 3 suspects after a mass shooting in Lawrence Heights. It left 1 person dead, 5 others injured.
Let's bring in CP24's Phil Perkins for the latest on the investigation. Phil, what do we know?
Well, Arda and Bakari, Beatrice was just talking about how that Piper Arms mass shooting was the first mass shooting we really saw here in the city of Toronto. Well, yesterday, 8:30 in the evening here at Lawrence Heights, just south of Yorkdale Mall. 6 people were shot in a brazen shootout here. We understand that the age ranges of the victims anywhere from 17 years old to 31 years old. The 31-year-old we do know is a man who later died of his injuries a short time later. Toronto police confirmed that the man was in a wheelchair. I spoke with local councillor Mike Cole. He told me that residents informed him that the man who perished was actually paralyzed from being shot back in 2018. He is the city's 13th murder of the year. Now, when it comes to the victim itself, there were some questions during the press conference earlier today that was caught live on CP24, suggesting this was maybe gang-related, where this was targeted, and that the person in the wheelchair was one of the targets. Here's what police had to say about that, as well as some residents living in the area.
Anyone who's going to be losing their life doesn't deserve to lose their life. So I guess depending on what your definition of innocent is, regardless of what anyone's involved in, they don't deserve to lose their life. So everybody who was involved, and certainly the person who lost their life, did not deserve that last night.
There was a whole lot. There was at least more than 20, I think, police I saw. And I didn't really see any paramedics. I think they were all back here, and my balcony facing the front, but just a whole bunch of police.
Police are looking for 3 gunmen. We don't have any ages, really, but we do understand that they have a slim build and they're wearing masks. So, again, a lot of police presence here. The Criminal Field Command Unit, they are here right now, as well as special constables, as well as Toronto Public Housing as well. So the investigation is still very much underway. Send it back to you.
Phil, thank you so much for this. Meanwhile, police are investigating shots fired at a restaurant on Queen Street West overnight.
Yeah, the call came in just before 4 o'clock in the morning. It happened on Queen between Dover Court and Lisgar. So police say officers arrived on the scene. They located a man. He had a cut from broken glass. Right now, there is no suspect information.
York police showing off the results of what they dubbed Project Chatter.
Okay, here's a look at some of the 32 guns and $7 million worth of drugs that were taken off the streets. The investigation was 7 months in the making. It ended with 23 people facing a total of 300 charges. York officers say their investigation was mainly centered in Richmond Hill, but it also reached to other parts of the GTA. And police say that this bust is going to put a serious dent in drugs and gun trade.
And rest assured, every day, that the members of York Regional Police are committed to disrupting and dismantling these organized crime groups. And we will deploy all resources available to us to remove illegal guns and illegal drugs from our streets and bring traffickers to justice.
The fentanyl, we have no information to suggest that the fentanyl was going into the United States. The guns absolutely are coming from the United States and are continuing to be a problem for us.
Police estimate they seized about 700,000 doses of fentanyl.
Well, the eastbound 401 was closed in Oshawa for hours today after a fatal crash.
Chopper 24 was over the scene in the eastbound lanes east of Harmony Road. OPP tells CP24 a 25-year-old motorcyclist from Pickering slammed into the back of a tractor trailer shortly before 6 o'clock this morning. He was transported to hospital where he was pronounced dead. The eastbound 401 were closed for more than 7 hours for the investigation before reopening early this afternoon.
Right now it's 5:13, 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Ontario has just passed a controversial mining legislation. We'll have reaction to Bill 5 next. Stay with us.
Well, the Ford government has passed controversial legislation to expedite critical mineral and resource projects.
The ayes being 71, the nays being 44, I declare the motion carried.
Those are protesters you could hear shouting in the gallery after Bill 5 was passed by a vote of 71 to 44. In recent days, several protests have been held on the front lawn of Queen's Park from First Nations and environmental groups. The new law gives the province powers to suspend provincial and municipal laws for chosen projects in areas it deems to have economic importance, like the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario.
Well, it's a very sad day in the province of Ontario. People of Ontario, many hundreds of thousands of people made their voices known to this government, and the government decided to proceed anyways, passing this no-law zone legislation. It's deeply undemocratic. And as I've said before, the government's going to trample on treaty rights. They have not listened to anyone. And I will say, the fight does not end here. The fight is just beginning.
And keep it here as we work to bring you more reaction to the passing of Bill 5.
The Bank of Canada is keeping its key interest rate unchanged at 2.75%, saying it needs more clarity on how American tariffs will affect the economy.
Okay, let's go to CP24's Andrew Brennan, who's joining us live from the newsroom with more on the central bank's decision. Andrew.
Well, this is a central bank decision, but the ripple effects, guys, are going to be felt in a lot of different ways. The big ones and the big pieces of this we're going to be getting into throughout the show. You have the housing impact, how the key interest rate here, which dictates particularly variable mortgage rates, how this will affect, well, a lull, for putting it mildly, in the housing market and sales these days in Toronto. But then we also have to talk about tariffs, and that also we will be discussing later on in the show. But with all of this together, it's creating let's call it a triple cocktail of economic uncertainty. And if you've ever worked in business, uncertainty does not make investment happen, or certainly happen all that quickly. We heard from the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem earlier explaining how looking south of the border and the economic slowdown here, how all of this pieces together.
Uncertainty remains high. The Canadian economy is softer, but not sharply weaker. And we've seen some firmness in recent inflation data. Against this backdrop, we decided to hold the policy rate unchanged as we continue to gain more information on U.S. trade policy and its impacts.
So the Bank of Canada is doing a bit of a seesaw, or really walking a very delicate tightrope right now. Arda, Bakari, when you think about it, when the economy slows, usually you try to lower interest rates to help drive people to spend more because borrowing costs go down. But then when it's inflation, which, by the way, is still above the target, when you look at the core inflation rate, that usually means you want to raise the interest rates to sort of slow down the economy. We have both of these things going on at the same time. This is why we're in a wait-and-see approach. Back to you.
Andrew, thank you so much for this. It's now 5:19, 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Well, the 50% U.S. tariff on Canadian aluminum and steel is now in effect. Coming up, we're going to have reaction from Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Well, the federal government is considering how to respond after U.S. President Donald Trump doubled import tariffs on steel and aluminum.
For more on the reaction to the latest salvo in the trade dispute, let's bring in CP24's Lindsay Biscaya. Lindsay, what can you tell us?
Well, at this point, Arda and Bakari, given that Canada is the largest importer of steel and aluminum into the U.S., this is going to hit Canada and the steel industry in particular quite hard here in this country. So we know now that executive order was signed by Donald Trump, increasing those import tariffs from 25% to 50% for all countries except the UK, because they don't have a final trade deal in place yet. So this is big news that we just heard last week, Donald Trump threatening to do this, and it went into effect today. We know Prime Minister Mark Carney has said those tariffs are what he called unjustified and unlawful. The Canadian government obviously does already have counter tariffs in place for the original 25% tariffs. But of course, now more needs to be done. And Mark Carney said today that his government is in negotiations to have the tariffs removed. But there is, of course, understandably, a lot of pressure for the government to not only move on this, but move quickly on this. And Premier Doug Ford was also speaking about that today because, of course, a lot of that steel production and aluminum production happens in Ontario. Here's more on what the Premier had to say.
We need to react immediately. We just can't sit back, because every single day that goes by, it gives uncertainty to the sectors. It adds additional cost. on the steel. So we need to react immediately. We need to put that other 25% on as soon as possible. And, you know, deal or no deal, if it's coming soon, well, President Trump wouldn't do what he's doing, and again, throwing an additional 25%. But it hurts both countries, and I can assure you, it's going to hurt the U.S. as well.
And so that's the message, really, that keeps coming back as well from a lot of Canadian politicians that we've heard over the last few months, is that this is going to hurt the U.S. And people in America as well as Canadians. And so at this point, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, has said that Canada will, quote, take some time but not much to respond to these tariffs. So I'm not sure, Arden Bakari, whether that means we could hear something by the end of the week or whether it might be longer than that. But of course, now all eyes on the Canadian government to think of something to come up and counter these tariffs. Back to you.
Okay, reporting live from the newsroom, CP24's Lindsay Biscayne. Lindsay, thank you very much. It's 5:23, 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the Stanley Cup final begins tonight with Edmonton and Florida going head-to-head once again. We'll be right back.
All right, Arda, the rematch is on. We're talking about the Stanley Cup final. It begins tonight with Edmonton and the Florida Panthers going head-to-head.
The Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup.
Last year, Edmonton lost in Game 7. It's not happening this year. This year's clash comes with a bit more patriotic fervor than usual in the midst of a tariff war between our two countries. The last Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup was the Montreal Canadiens in 1993. Can you believe it? Since then, Canadian teams have been in 7 Cup finals and lost every time. But you know what? Our 7-year bad streak is over. That person that broke that mirror, it's over. The curse is over.
I expect probably early on in the game actually to be kind of boring as they kind of feel each other out and just get back into the swing of actually playing professional hockey at the highest level. So I'm curious. I mean, Edmonton should have a boost. They are at home. But then on the other end, the Florida Panthers, and this is why they're so dangerous, they're setting records in terms of goal differential on the road. They're like 8-2 on the road, outscoring their opponents by 27. So I am fascinated by the first 5 minutes. How does Edmonton look, especially with the crowd behind them?
And puck drop tonight is at 8 o'clock in Edmonton.
Reigning Masters champion Rory McIlroy potentially injecting some optimism into Leafs Nation ahead of the RBC Canadian Open after he got over the hump and achieved a career Grand Slam earlier this year.
If the Leafs end up winning the Cup, it's going to be nothing to do with me. It's going to be all them. But I hope they do it. You know, I was pulling for them hard, especially now that Keith is involved. I guess we all got to throw our support behind the Oilers at this point. But yeah, it's one day, I hope. I was hoping that they were still going to be in, and maybe we would have been able to get to a game this week. But I hope so. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time. You know, if I can get over the line at Augusta, these guys can get over the line at the Stanley Cup.
And the RBC Canadian Open tees off tomorrow from TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley. And you can catch all the action on TSN.
It's 5:28 right now, a beautiful 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Well, 10 people have been arrested. More than 200 charges have been laid and several violent incidents across the GTA, including a mass shooting at a Scarborough pub.
9 people were shot, a dozen were injured. This happened in the mass shooting last March at Piper Arms. Today, police announced arrests and charges. CP24's Beatrice Vaisman and crime analyst Steve Ryan connect the dots.
Well, 6 people were shot in another mass shooting. 1 died. This happened last night in Lawrence Heights. This evening, police continue to search for suspects.
And Ontario has just passed a controversial mining legislation. We'll have reaction to Bill 5 coming up.
This is Live at 5.
Hello, I'm Arda Zakarian.
And I'm Bakari Savage. Welcome to Live at 5. So police are looking for 3 suspects after a mass shooting in Lawrence Heights. This left 1 person dead. 5 others were hurt.
And for the latest on the investigation, let's bring in CP24's Phil Perkins. Phil, what do we know so far?
Arna Bakar, yeah, this happened around 8:30 last night, and Toronto police say that a group of 3 gunmen brazenly opened fire outside here in Lawrence Heights. There's affordable housing to my direct right here. There's multiple townhouses to my left, also private condos close to the Rainey, just south of Yorkdale Mall, and they opened fire, hitting 6 people. They range in ages from 17 to 31. 5 of the victims received non-life-threatening injuries. However, the 31-year-old man was later pronounced dead in hospital. I spoke with Mike Cole, the local counselor. He confirmed to me that he was in a wheelchair, the victim, at the time of the shooting, and that, in fact, he was actually paralyzed after being shot back in 2018, and he is Toronto's 13th murder victim. Now, Toronto police not giving too much information, really. They gave that presser earlier today a lot more information about the shooting that happened back in March, but this one, again, still very recent. They're looking for 3 men as the gunmen. They have slim builds. They're wearing masks at the time of the shooting. Now, as for whether this was targeted or not, or whether people living in this community should be, walking around with a little bit more hesitation, here's what police had to say about that. Also, someone who lives in the area for the last 5 years, this is how he feels.
We do believe that it's targeted. In terms of it being gang-related, we're absolutely investigating every possibility. We're within 24 hours of the shooting having occurred, so we're looking at every avenue.
And I was going to ask you, was he victim in a wheelchair?
He was. So there were multiple guns used. I won't speak to the specific number as that forms part of the investigation. Similarly, I won't speak to the specific number of casings that we found, but I can say that there were multiple rounds.
Like a shooting this size I haven't really seen before, with the amount of casualties, 1 person deceased. I've heard gunshots in the past, 3-4 years ago, but never nothing this big. Yeah. And I'm always walking my dog. I always feel confidently safe, but probably not now anymore.
And Mayor Olivia Chow commented on this shooting last night on X. Mayor Olivia Chow commenting on the shooting, and now she will be reportedly making her way here to Lawrence Heights alongside Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkew and local councillor Mike Cole. They will be here at Lawrence Heights tomorrow at noon. This after City Hall released a new initiative to try to deter young people from being either victims of gun violence or being perpetrators in gun violence. As I mentioned before, the victims here ranging in ages from 17 to 31. Definitely gun control, trying to put an end to gun violence in this city is something that is very important to the mayor. I'm sure she'll face a lot of questions about that after yesterday's mass shooting here. Meantime, send it back to you, too.
Thank you so much for this, Phil. A warning that some viewers may find the following video disturbing. 10 people have been arrested and more than 200 charges have been laid in several violent incidents across the GTA, including a mass shooting at a Scarborough pub.
On March 7th, 3 suspects started shooting with an assault-style rifle and 2 handguns. This was at Piper Arms pub near the 401 in McCowan. A dozen people were injured, including 9 who were shot. So all the victims survived, although police say that some sustained life-altering injuries.
In total, for this incident and other incidents, investigators have laid 203 charges against 11 people, including 24 counts of attempt murder. Before I pass it over to Superintendent McIntyre of Organized Crime Enforcement, who will provide further details, I want to thank all of our members who have worked tirelessly on this case.
Well, investigators were able to establish links between the pub shooting and several other previously unsolved shootings, including at tow truck yards in the city.
Let's go live to CP24's Beatrice Baseman and crime analyst Steve Ryan at police headquarters. A lot to unpack here, Beatrice.
Very much. A lot of information given to us by Toronto Police today. It's the first update that we got actually since March 7th, which was the night of the shooting at the Piper Arms pub, the pub's opening night. And starting that night, there was already speculation that the shooting there at the pub was somehow connected to the tow truck industry, that perhaps the owner of the Piper Arms pub was involved with the tow truck industry. Police wouldn't comment on that today, but they did release this really compelling footage from inside the pub. You see patrons were standing standing there a moment ago enjoying their time when 3 masked suspects, one with an assault-style rifle, 2 with handguns, entered and started indiscriminately firing at people. Incredibly brazen. The chief says this video really speaks to the disregard for human life that these suspects had. Now, interestingly, police say, firstly, that all 3 of those masked suspects now arrested. They've managed to link one of those suspects to a series of other violent incidents in the GTA. So let's go back to March 4th, 3 days now prior to this shooting at the Piper Arms. The first incident at St. Clair and Weston Road. That's where police told us today that a pair of masked suspects once again approached a victim at a tow truck yard and started firing at this person multiple times. That person thankfully survived. And then later on that same night, police allege these suspects, who were, by the way, in a stolen vehicle, went from St. Clair and Weston down to Markham Road and Eglinton, and they opened fire on someone who was washing their car at a car wash. And again, police released video surveillance footage. Here it is from that incident as well. It looks like it was actually a tow truck or some kind of pickup truck that was being washed over there. And so police now able to connect these various incidents. And we asked Superintendent Paul McIntyre from the Organized Crime Enforcement Team, who oversees Guns and Gangs Task Force. I asked him, is this gang violence? Was this a gang that was targeting members of the tow truck industry? And here's his answer.
I can say, though, that the Gun and Gang Unit, also, it's the Integrated Gun and Gang Task Force. We investigate gangs and we investigate shootings and firearm discharges. Right now, we can't classify these people as a gang. They're not a gang. They're not the definition of a gang. They're just a collective of a bunch of guys that got together and they're doing these shootings. But no, they're certainly not a gang.
And so a lot to unpack here. Let's bring in our crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Let's start with what we heard from Superintendent Paul McIntyre. He said this wasn't a gang. This was just a group of guys. Tell us why he was hesitant to actually call them a gang.
Well, it doesn't meet the definition under the criminal code. The code defines a gang as 3 or more people who conspire or get together for the purposes of committing criminal acts. And they need to have a formal structure or a formal foundation or have something in common, such as you call yourselves a gang and you have the same postal code, the same colors, under the same symbol. This is not that. This is, as the superintendent said, just a group of hired thugs who were hired to intimidate those that are in the tow truck industry, some of the tow truck industry.
When you watch this video, Steve, 3 different pieces that police shared with us today, what stood out to you? What were you watching for?
Well, the brazenness of the shootings, that is for sure. It appears as though those that were doing the shooting weren't concerned about being caught. So on that note, there was some very good detective work done. We heard from the superintendent today. He said that there were no fingerprints or no DNA. This was done through hard police work. So credit to them for making those arrests, and we're still waiting to hear, I'm still waiting to hear whether or not that restaurant is connected to these tow trucks.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation. You reported from the scene the next day. People were telling you that they believed there was a connection. So now we learned there's some kind of connection. One of the individuals now accused in the Piper Arms shooting, also accused in these 2 shootings connected to the tow truck industry. What does that tell you?
Sometimes the lack of motive is your motive, and sometimes the simplest answer, Occam's razor, the simplest answer is your answer. So you've got one person amongst that group of 10 hired thugs, again, to use the superintendent's words, was responsible for that shooting at the restaurants. That might be your connection. So the lack of response from the police today with regards to, we can't say it's connected, nor can we say it's not connected, suggests to me that they still have some detective work to do to either make that connection or rule it out, and they haven't done that yet.
Tell us what happens behind the scenes. You've got these different pieces of video surveillance. I imagine they were gathered in the first 24 hours by investigators. And then you've got intelligence work that happens behind the scenes. And we heard from the chief as well today that they did 10 different search warrants in different regions: Toronto, Durham, Brantford, York. What does that tell you about kind of the network, the web that police were trying to untangle here?
So it's a collaborative effort for sure. It's almost a joint forces kind of approach. And it goes to, again, the quality of the police work. They were sharing information, and it was through working informants, working your own information, your own intel. This was any type of investigative work like this that involves such seriousness as a tow truck turf war. It requires a lot of intelligence. It requires a lot of officers gaining the trust of those in the community and feeding them information.
All right. right, Steve Ryan, thanks so much for spending the afternoon with me here at Toronto Police Headquarters. Certainly, this is the hope is, at least, Arda and Bakari, when police delivered this press conference, it would at least bring, a bit of peace of mind to the victims of the Piper Arms shooting and their families. I spoke to a mom whose daughter was shot in the arm, and she still does not have full use of her arm. So for her, it could hopefully bring a bit of peace of mind, a bit of answers as to what exactly happened inside that pub that night and the ripple effect throughout the city as well. Back to you.
Beatrice, thank you so much for this, and thank you as well to our crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Police are investigating shots fired at a restaurant on Queen Street West overnight.
Yeah, the call came in just before 4 o'clock in the morning. It happened on Queen between Dover Court and Lisgar. And police said that officers arrived on the scene. They found a man who had a cut from broken glass, but there's no suspect information just yet.
York police showed off the results of what they dubbed Project Chatter.
Okay, here's a look at some of the 32 guns and $7 million worth of drugs taken off the streets. The investigation was 7 months in the making. It ended with 23 people facing a total of 300 charges. York officers say that their investigation was mainly centered in Richmond Hill, but it also reached other parts of the GTA. So police say this bust, it'll put a serious dent in drugs and gun trade.
What's really been renewed is our level of reporting on these types of seizures and the actions that are being undertaken by our law enforcement partners in this regard specifically, because I think we weren't doing a good enough job of highlighting the dangers that one dose of fentanyl poses. I think the general public understands, but from an overall public safety concern, I don't think we were really painting an accurate picture.
We don't have any evidence yet to see where the fentanyl is coming from. Obviously, fentanyl is a man-made substance. The precursor chemicals, come from different countries. Can it be produced here in Canada? Yes, it can. But we have no evidence to suggest that it is being produced here or if it's being imported from other source countries.
And police estimate that they seized about 700,000 doses of fentanyl.
The eastbound 401 was closed in Oshawa for hours today after a fatal crash.
Chopper 24 was over the scene in the eastbound lanes east of Harmony Road. To OPP tells CP24 a 25-year-old motorcyclist from Pickering slammed into the back of a tractor trailer shortly before 6 this morning. He was transported to hospital. That's where he was pronounced dead. And the eastbound 401, the lanes were closed for more than 7 hours for the investigation before reopening early this afternoon.
It's 5:43 right now, 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Ontario has just passed controversial mining legislation. We're going to have reaction to Bill 5 next.
Welcome back. Let's check on the commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adwa. How's the commute home now?
Oh, you know how it is, Arda. Not moving. So if you're making your way out this hour, patience is definitely what you're going to need if you're making your way out on the major routes. We're dealing with a significant issue now. If you're out there Pickering and usually get onto the southbound Liverpool on-ramp that brings you onto the westbound 401, not seeing too much of a delay, obviously, on the highway, but that ramp has been closed because of a pretty serious collision. Rest of the 401, it's been busy all afternoon long, but all earlier problems have cleared. Don Valley Parkway still a busy place to be, starting from Bayview Bloor all the way up to the 401 and quite slow on the Gardners. You make your way out of and head in to the downtown core. Outside of camera view, a couple of issues. We'll start with problems on the westbound lanes of the 401 at Highway 6 North. Pretty serious collision does have the two left lanes occupied, and westbound 403 at Waterdown Road, stalled vehicle has a live lane blocked. I'll send it back to you both.
Okay, thanks, Aj.
You're welcome.
Well, the Ford government has passed controversial legislation to expedite critical mineral and resource projects.
The ayes being 71, the nays being 44, I declare the motion carried.
That's the sound of protesters. You can hear them shouting in the gallery after Bill 5 was passed by a vote of 71 to 44. In recent days, several protests have been held on the front lawn of Queen's Park from First Nations and environmental groups. The new law gives the province powers to suspend provincial and municipal laws for chosen projects in areas that it deems to have economic importance, like the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario.
This fight does not end here. The government has had a terrible track record. Just like the notwithstanding clause, this is going to end up in the courts, and they are going to end up repealing it. It's just a matter of time. I also want to know where the Premier was today when this so important piece of legislation was passed. I want to hear what his excuse is, because from where we sit, he looks like a coward.
And keep it here as we continue to work to bring you the very latest reaction to the passing of Bill 5.
The federal government is considering how to respond after U.S. President Donald Trump doubled import tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Okay, let's go live to the newsroom for reaction to the latest salvo in the trade dispute. For that, we turn to CP24's Lindsay Biscay. Lindsay.
Yeah, so now it's really up to the federal government once again to pick up the pieces in terms of this latest tariff imposed by the U.S., those imports on steel and aluminum. And considering the fact that Canada is the U.S. largest importer of steel and aluminum, this is going to hit the industry quite hard here, particularly in Quebec and Ontario. Prime Minister Mark Carney was saying today that these new tariffs are unjustified, unlawful. He also said they were illegal. And despite the fact that the Canadian government does already have counter tariffs in place for the initial 25% tariffs from a couple of months ago, now the Canadian government and the provinces as well are going to have to figure out how to retaliate once again. And a lot of industry leaders are speaking out, talking about what they believe are the best ways forward and the best ways to retaliate to save the industry and all the workers here in Canada, including Keenan Loomis, president and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction. We spoke with him last hour about what he would like to see the federal government do. Take a listen.
My guys, I represent the fabricators across the country. We're the ones that take the steel and engineer it. We do all the value add. We cut it, we create the connections, and we build our infrastructure here in Canada. Right now, the private sector is understandably stopping all of their projects. And so we need to rely on government spending, both provincially and federally, to be able to fill that gap.
So as I mentioned, the federal government, Lena and Bakari, looking at ways to retaliate next. But Premier Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, also speaking out today, floating the idea again of bringing back that 25% electricity surcharge to the U.S. This is something that Doug Ford originally threatened and then didn't end up doing. But Doug Ford saying today that once again, everything is on the table right now. That is also something he said before. But once again, we're talking about a 50% tariff now. So that has increased quite a bit, and Canada will have to respond. Back to you.
Okay, CP24's Lindsay Biscay joining us live from the newsroom. Thank you. Right now it's 5:50, 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
The latest data on home sales in the GTA shows that the market remained weak. We'll take a closer look at the numbers next. Stay with us.
Well, the latest data on home sales in the GTA shows that the market did remain weak in May.
The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board says more than 6,200 homes were sold in May. That's down over 13% year over year. Meanwhile, there were just under 22,000 new listings. That's an increase of 14%. That boost in inventory gave buyers more negotiating leverage. The average selling price decreased 4% to $1.12 million.
Over the last year, we've certainly seen an increase in supply, both in the aggregate, but also relative to the number of people out there buying. And so if you're active in the market today, in a lot of neighborhoods throughout the city of Toronto and surrounding GTA, you're experiencing more choice and more negotiating power. And that's why we have seen, prices edge downwards a little bit over the last year. And that sets up this sort of affordable situation. So again, if we see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of trade disputes, in terms of the negotiations that are going on, literally today, south of the border, that'll give people confidence to move off the sidelines, and they'll want to take advantage of lower borrowing costs. They'll want to take advantage of lower prices.
Expected to rebound probably nearing the beginning of 2026. And on the condo side, we will see a major rebound with the lack of development that happened this year and last year. No new projects launched. So people have to remember there is going to be a major lack of supply in the next 3 to 4 years, and we will see a major rebound in the condo market side.
Well, the average price of a detached home in the GTA was down over 5% to $1.42 million. Right now it's 5:55, 30 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, we'll have reaction to the Ford government passing a controversial piece of legislation. Welcome back. A documentary about the late Canadian actor and comedian John Candy will open the 50th edition of the Toronto International Film Festival this September.
Del Griffith, American Light and Fixture, Director of Sales, Shower Curtain Ring Division.
John Candy, I Like Me, traces his personal and professional life with never-before-seen home videos. Director Colin Hanks and producer Ryan Reynolds say that the SCTV cast member was not only a great actor, but an even better person. And some of Candy's most memorable movies include Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Uncle Buck, and Canadian Bacon. He died in 1994 at the age of 43. So the documentary makes its world premiere at TIFF during the opening night gala, September 4th.
Who doesn't remember a Camp Candy? Grew up with that. Cyclists made their way to City Hall today for the annual Bike to Work Today.
Mayor Olivia Chow and other members of City Council took part in the Bike Month event. This year's ride, it comes at a tense time for cyclists in the city because Cycle Toronto and bike lane advocates are in a court battle with the provincial government over plans to remove bike lanes on some downtown roads.
It's 5:59 right now, 30 degrees. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.